Welcome to this week's episode of the Dance Reel podcast. This season, I really want to focus on authenticity in dance. And one of the important subjects, which for me as a dance mentor judge, is are we crossing a line? Oversexualisation in dance and the responsibility we as a community share. So today's episode sits in that space that is uncomfortable, it's complex, and in many ways overdue. Let's pull it apart, oversexualisation in dance. Not from a place of outrage, not from a place of moral superiority, but from a place of responsibility and care. Because whether we like it or not, this is not an isolated issue. It's cultural, it's systemic, and it is being reinforced in ways that are often subtle and normalised, and then even rewarded. There is a growing body of research and commentary showing that hyper-sexualised choreography, costuming and music are being introduced to dancers at increasingly younger ages. This is not just anecdotal, it is being observed across competitions, studios and media representations of dance. And importantly, research consistently points to the potential harm of this. Increased self-objectification, reduced self-esteem, confusion around identity and self-worth, and a shift in how young people learn to relate to their bodies. When a child begins to understand their value through how they are perceived rather than how they feel or what they can express, something important begins to distort. What are we actually talking about? Oversexualisation is often misunderstood. It is not simply about wearing makeup. It is not simply about confidence or performance quality. It is when adult-coded ideas of sexuality are placed into a child's body, expression or performance. This can happen through choreography that mimics adult intimacy, or costuming that reflects adult aesthetics, or sexualized styling music that carries implicit or implied sexual themes, facial expressions, or performance direction that requires a child to embody something developmentally beyond them. And often the child does not fully understand what they are performing, but the audience does. And that gap matters. Why this is happening? There are a few forces at play here. First, media influence. Sexualized imagery is deeply embedded in music videos, advertising, and social platforms. These messages filter into choreography, often unconsciously. And this is when it's really important that as choreographers, we are choreographing to the age and to the level of maturity of that performer, not what we may want to express either consciously or unconsciously. Second, competition culture. There is often a pattern emerging where routines that push boundaries are sometimes rewarded. When something places well, it becomes a reference point. And third, when there is a misunderstanding of what performance maturity actually is. Intensity gets mistaken for depth. Sexuality gets mistaken for confidence. Adult themes get mistaken for artistry. For teachers and choreographers, this is where I want to slow things down, because this is absolutely not about blame or shaming anyone. It is about awareness. When you're creating work for a young dancer, there are some essential questions worth sitting with. And I too was once a young choreographer, and I can look back at some of my work that at the time I thought was cool, and now I look back and cringe. So believe me when I say this is not about shaming anyone. This is about just sitting back and objectively having a look at our own work and questioning it, which is a healthy thing to do. Is the music relatable to the lived experience of the dancer? Not just because they like that song, not just rhythmically, but emotionally. Is the costuming aligned with their age and developmental stage? Does the choreography ask them to access something they can genuinely feel or something they are imitating? And one of the most important questions, does this routine enhance their development, or does it ask them to perform beyond it? Enhancement means deepening what is already there, It does not mean accelerating them into something they are not ready for. There is a difference between expressive movement and performative imitation, and dancers know the difference even if they cannot articulate it. But yes, younger dancers always seem to look up to older dancers and want to copy them and become them, and this is where we as teachers need to put the structure in place that supports them where they are at now. Creativity, another piece that often gets overlooked in this space. Many routines now are dense, fast, packed with tricks, transitions, and moments designed to impress. But when everything is full, nothing is felt. Creativity requires space, emotion requires time, and meaning requires stillness. If a dancer has no room to breathe inside a routine, they often default to surface performance. And that is where exaggerated expression, including sexualized expression, can begin to creep in. For parents, when do you speak up? This is where it becomes personal, because many parents sit in the audience feeling uncomfortable, but unsure whether that discomfort is valid. A simple framework: if you feel a moment of hesitation in your body, pay attention to it. Questions to consider: would I be comfortable if this performance was shown outside of a dance context? Does my child understand what they are portraying? Would I be comfortable with this being recorded and shared publicly? There is also a broader layer. Research highlights that sexualized performance can contribute to children learning to view themselves through an external lens rather than an internal sense of self. That is not a small shift. Speaking up does not need to be confrontational. It can sound like, I'm curious about the intention behind this piece. Can you help me understand the choice of music or theme? I want to make sure this aligns with where my child is at developmentally. You are allowed to ask questions. This is not just about individual studios or teachers. This is a broader cultural normalisation. And having judged across the globe, Europe, South Africa, UK, it is in every country. There are documented cases of very young dancers performing highly sexualized routines, even incorporating adult themes and props, and being rewarded for it. When that happens, it reinforces the standard, and standards shape behaviour. So part of this conversation is also about adjudication, event organisers and the wider industry taking responsibility for what is being evaluated and normalised. What healthy training looks like. A healthy training environment does not remove expression. It refines it. It supports age-appropriate storytelling, emotional authenticity, creativity over imitation, confidence that is grounded, not performed. Dance has the capacity to support identity development, emotional awareness, and connection to the body. That is the potential of this art form, and it is definitely worth protecting. This is not about shutting things down. This is about refining what we value. It is about asking better questions. It is about recognizing that children do not need to be pushed into adult expression to be compelling, powerful, or artistic. In many cases, the most honest performances come from simplicity, clarity, and truth. And that is something worth returning to. If this episode raised questions for you, I encourage you to stay with them, not to rush to answers, because change in this space does not come from reaction. It comes from awareness, conversation, and a willingness to take responsibility for the environments we are all creating and the standards we are reinforcing. If this episode resonated with you today, please like, comment, and share with a friend. That would be a great help. Thank you so much. And in the meantime, let's keep it real.